What's going on, guys? Welcome back to the Hands-On channel. We're out here on the back 40, I guess we'll say, of my property. I haven't been back here in a while, and I thought I'd get the white buffalo out and flex her muscles a little bit, run through some fields I haven't driven through in a while and stuff like that. Honestly, it's so dry right now, I didn't have to use any four-wheel drive or anything like that, but still, it's a lot of fun to just come out here and blast around, get out in the woods with your truck. And this is where the white buffalo actually comes alive, man. It's like this slow, low crawler, type of a vehicle. So anyway, I'm having a lot of fun today, and I thought for a moment I would stop and just talk to you guys about, well, for one thing, a lot of things we're going to talk about and cover today are, I'll tell you right up front, are speculation. I have no proof of a lot of these things other than, minor blips and news stories that I've gathered along the years. But one thing we're seeing here, yesterday and today, I believe, there were congressional hearings on what they're calling UAPs, unidentified aerial phenomenon or something like that. It's basically UFOs. And for whatever reason, they've decided to change the name now to UAP. I don't like it. I think it's part of the control mechanism to control language that our government constantly uses against the citizenry here, the United States of America and the world. But a lot of revelations came out yesterday, and honestly, I tend to believe David Grush and his story and all those other witnesses, the whistleblowers that were testifying on the floor of Congress. I mean, for one thing, if they were lying, they would be lying under oath. So that has repercussions, up to jail time and fines and things like that. So I'm sure none of these people want that in their lives. So I found it very interesting. Now, were there any huge revelations? No, not really. But I think it confirms a lot of the things that a lot of people have been looking at for years and years and wondering, scratching their heads, wondering, what is this thing? Why are we seeing all these weird things like the Phoenix lights and, all the way back to Roswell? I'm not going to rehash every one, but I've mentioned before in a video, I'm not going to go into detail, but I have seen something myself. I don't know what it was. Could have just been a weird anomaly, a light anomaly in space. But I did see something when I was a young guy about, I don't know, probably like anywhere from 12 to 14 years old. I don't remember exactly the date when it happened, but again, I was pretty young, so I didn't really think a lot about it, but it was witnessed by several people in my family. So it wasn't just me seeing this thing, and I wasn't doing drugs, I wasn't drinking, I was 14 years old at most, so I was clean and sober, had nothing going on in my life that would have altered my sense of reality. So now some of the people that were there, they may have been drinking and stuff. I don't know. They were adults and stuff, but the point is that people saw this thing. Multiple people saw it, and since that day, I'm going to tell you, I've always believed that there's something else out there. Nowhere in the Bible do I read that we're special here on earth, that God only created us and created nothing else in the universe. So I just don't think that jives, and it doesn't. A lot of people have a problem with. A lot of Christians have a problem accepting the idea that there are other life forms out there because it doesn't specifically talk about them directly in the Bible. But you can make the argument that, the Nephilim, the Watchers, the fallen angels, all these other things, these references in the Bible, they could be referring to UFOs way back in the day before Jesus' time. So I don't know. We see a lot of things in weird paintings from like Michelangelo and other famous authors that they'll put like a little UFO in the background. You're like, and some guy's over there staring up at it. So it's obviously trying to get you to look at this thing that's in the sky that shouldn't be there. So I say all that to say this. I don't know. I have no concrete proof, but I do believe that they exist. I believe there are other life forms. If the universe is I guess there is a limit to it. I was going to say unlimited, but as far as our knowledge goes of what's in the universe, we have barely scratched the surface. Even sending our best technologically advanced satellites, to the edges of our galaxy, we still barely know anything about our own galaxy. So all that said, I think it's great news that the Congress are actually taking this seriously now. Now, one thing I find interesting is a lot of people, and I get why people think this, a lot of people think that this is a false flag or a distraction, and they're going to bring out Project Bluebeam, and they're going to, blast an image in the sky of a spaceship and an invasion. And honestly, they could do that. They could very well do that. They love to use psychological operations. So, I mean, that is not outside of the realm of possibilities, that this is all a psyop being done to, control us in the future. It could very well be that, but I don't believe so. I don't believe people like those whistleblowers like David Grush are a part of that operation. Now, I could be completely wrong, but the things that I saw and the tone and the just the way he was able to access information quickly, rapid fire, it didn't seem like the guy was making any of this stuff up. Not only on the floor of the Congress when he was testifying yesterday and today, but during that other interview that he had like a month ago or whatever. So anyway, I believe they're out there, guys. I don't know what they are. It's, I guess, pretty possible they could be interdimensional species that the reason we don't see them all the time is they're existing on some other plane that we're not able to access at this point. I mean, I don't know. I don't know. It does bring up a lot more questions than answers. So, but one of the bombshells they actually talked about yesterday and today were that, the United States has actually captured vessels. They have commandeered vessels that have crash landed or have been shot down or whatever. They didn't actually say shot down, so they were talking mostly about crash landings. And I thought one of the senators actually, or congressmen, actually had a really good question. He was like, come on, if these people are that advanced and they can come, from all the way across the other side of the universe to our galaxy and, come to our planet, I mean, it's not very likely that they would just be crashing their vehicles all the time and we'd be able to, go capture these things, right? So I thought that was a great question because I've heard a lot of people on the last video that I made, several people made that argument. And it's a good, logical, Occam's razor based argument. So I understand where you're coming from. But at the same time, we drive vehicles, we're fairly advanced, or we think we are anyway. We're fairly advanced, we have vehicles, we drive around, we have airplanes, and sometimes those planes crash, and it's just a technical or a mechanical failure or operator failure, the pilot falls asleep for a moment. I don't know. And we have no idea what the effects are on these craft that are suddenly coming into our atmosphere. One thing I find really fascinating is that many of these vehicles have been spotted going into water, into the ocean at like full speed. And so it appears they have some way of manipulating gravity and manipulating the forces of nature that would normally affect us in like an airplane or a boat or anything like that, because you get resistance. Even in a boat, as you're pushing that water, you're getting resistance off of that water running along the hull of the boat, right? So one would assume that anything that went into the water at full speed would be the equivalent of like hitting a concrete wall, right? Sorry, got a mosquito on my back. They're tearing me up this year. We've got really terrible mosquitoes. But anyway, you would think something like that would be vaporized if it impacted the water like that at full speed. But apparently these craft have the ability to manipulate their surroundings, the atmosphere, the forces of nature. One testimony on the Congress floor, they were talking about how one of these vessels, he described it as a sphere that had a cube inside of it. So it was a big cube, a big black cube, I think he said, and the corners of the cube were all touching the sphere, almost sort of like what you would imagine like a force field, like on Star Trek or Star Wars or something like that, right? So I don't know what exactly is going on there, but they seem to have the ability to at least manipulate gravity and the effects of nature, the forces of nature. And one of the most compelling testimonies that I heard was this black thing, this cube with a sphere around it, was sitting there in hurricane force winds, not moving an inch. And they captured all this on radar. So the good news with all of this stuff for people that are like me, that are curious minds, that want to know more about the universe, want to know more about these, extraterrestrial or interdimensional species that are visiting our planet for some reason. The news is starting to finally come out on that stuff, and people aren't viewed the same way. 10, 15 years ago, if you started talking about aliens in any of your friend groups, most likely at least 3 or 4 of those people were going to be raising their eyebrow going, yeah, okay, yeah, you're crazy. Let me get the straitjacket out for you. You believe in little green men, blah, blah, blah. You've been watching too much X-Files. You've been watching too much, History Channel or whatever. And honestly, I think a lot of the stuff that is being broadcast out there, you know, the shows, the televised shows like on History Channel. I think a lot of those are actually designed to make people that are genuinely curious look like damn fools. I mean, when you see this stuff, I mean, you can blow holes. If you're halfway reasonable and logical, you can blow holes in almost every one of these History Channel and Discovery Channel reports where they have like ancient aliens and UFOs and all these shows, right? I mean, they're almost always nonsensical, and they seem to be the effect that they're having is making or continuing the the ability of our controllers to keep us in line, to keep us in a box, right? And if you start questioning these things or whatever, then you're labeled crazy. So anyway, I think it's very refreshing that this stuff is finally coming out and they're actually talking about it in a serious fashion on the floor of Congress. And you know, most of the congressmen actually had really great questions. It seemed a little dry at times. They could have been, I would have been asking a lot of different questions, but you know, they kept running into these issues where, you know, the witnesses would say, I'm not allowed to say that because that's classified. I can tell you that in a skiff, they called it, and I'm not exactly sure what that means, but basically it sounded like it was like a meeting off the record outside of, you know, the lens of the camera and the media and stuff like that. So I think that's all great stuff that we're finally starting to get some investigation, not even answers, but investigations into these things. Now, does our military, does DARPA, does all these, you know, shadowy government organizations, the CIA, DARPA, you know, the deep state, all these people, do they have access to the technology that they've been able to harvest off of these crashed vessels? I don't know. I don't know, but I wouldn't put it past them. And they certainly aren't going to be voluntarily telling the people of America if they have something that's, at least on the surface, unexplainable. I mean, I'm reminded of the SR-71 Blackbird, a badass plane. I mean, it's one of the sexiest, most badass planes that's ever flown. And the United States people, the world, didn't know about it for something like 40 or 50 years. They kept that secret. So if they've got a huge bird that's that unique, that has that sort of a, you know, an imprint when you look at it in the sky, and they were able to keep that secret for 40 or 50 years, I mean, logic would tell you that they have similar stuff that they've probably harvested off of these craft that they're not telling us about. So I want to talk a little bit about some of that kind of stuff today. You know, I did a deep dive last night and just kind of refreshed my memory about all the different things that I've seen over the years. So I'm going to try to cover all these topics very briefly. And my intention with this video is to start a conversation with you guys. What do you think about all this stuff that's coming out? Is it a distraction? Don't let my intro here, you know, shape your opinion. Tell me what you genuinely feel. If you feel like this is all bullshit and it's all being done and orchestrated to distract us from other bigger political issues like Hunter Biden and Joe Biden and all the Burisma money and all this other stuff, right? If you feel it's a distraction, let us know down in the comments and tell us why you think it's a distraction, and also tell us what you think their next move is going to be, because that's the most important thing that we're all trying to figure out. And so I wanted to talk to you about a few topics that, again, this is a lot of this stuff is speculation. So, you know, forgive me. I don't have concrete proof. I don't have a script that I'm going off of. This is just stuff that I've seen that's really stood out in my mind over the years. You know, we go back in time to like the late 90s. And I remember, I think it was the late 90s, they cloned the first sheep. Dolly was the name, D-O-L-L-Y, I believe. They cloned the first sheep. And I thought, you know, that's a big deal. You know, and you back up a little more than that, they mapped the human genome. I believe that was in the late 90s as well. So right about the same time, they mapped the human genome and they started doing these things with it. And then they cloned a sheep, right? And I'm sure they have cloned many, 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 many other creatures, probably also including human beings. I believe that. I believe there are, you know, shadowy, deep state organizations that are funded by people outside of government funding, outside of taxpayer money, they're using money that they're, I don't know, getting from drug lords or whatever, or maybe it's donations that come in from people like Klaus Schwab's and other people, Elon Musk even, that has a lot of money. They can donate towards these kinds of missions and, and find out things that maybe normal citizens wouldn't be able to find out about, right? So they're buying access is what I'm saying. So I think there's some of that going on, but I also believe that we, as a civilization, we have no idea what our government is actually doing. And I think that whatever you can imagine, they've probably tried it. They've probably tried it. You go back in time far enough and I hope you guys have seen the movie, Men Who Stare at Goats, Now it was a comedy movie. It was made, in jest and in light, to make a comedy, right? To make people laugh and stuff. And also to discredit some of these shadowy government systems and programs that have come out, like MK Ultra, all these other ones. I don't want MK Naomi, on and on and on. So many different programs that have come out. And when you make a movie and produce a movie like Men Who Stare at Goats, which was basically roughly based on, I can't remember the name of that program, but it was basically based on the idea that you could kill a goat by willing it in your mind and using projecting psychic attacks against other entities and creatures and things like that. And there's also the whole thing about what do they call it, remote viewing, where you can imagine, like right now today, imagine inside the Kremlin, inside the the most fortified place there is, where Putin has his most secretive meetings and stuff. Supposedly, they figured out how to remote view, meaning that they could, astral project their soul or their being or their essence inside of this building, and no one else would know, and they'd be able to make little notes or whatever and come back and tell their bosses oh yeah, Putin's planning a counterinsurgency wave, on the 13th of this month or whatever, right? So whatever they would hear or overhear in these meetings, they could come back and report that to their bosses and stuff, and they would get, intel from their enemies, right? So I don't know if that's real or not. Honestly, I have no, I don't believe in that very much. I don't know. Again, I have never done anything like that. I have never had an out-of-body experience like that, even though I have tried some of the exercises to, they claim that you can do certain things as you're falling asleep, and it will help you astral project out into the plane, and you'll be able to, go out and do these things or whatever. But I have never had any success. Does that mean it's ridiculous and doesn't work? No. It may mean that, my mind doesn't have that capability, but there could be other people out there that have that capability. I mean, let's not forget, we're only using what do they say? 10% of our brain or something. It's ridiculously low amounts of brain power that we're using, considering we have this big, sponge up in our head that's capable of doing all these things that we have no idea about. So again, this is speculation. I have no idea if any of this stuff's true, but I do know that they actually had the program. The United States government thought it was worthwhile back in the 50s and 60s or whenever that was to investigate this stuff. So when I hear about that sort of thing, that gives it at least some degree of credibility. So fast forward back into what we're talking about today. We see all these things, we hear all these things about AI right now. AI is all over the news, artificial intelligence. Some argue that the United States military and the Pentagon have been using artificial intelligence for years and years already. And the stuff we're seeing, like ChatGPT and stuff like this, is basically the, toned down version that's designed for the public to use. And so I don't know if that's true or not, but I could see where people would come up with that conclusion. Some of the things that have gone on in the past here in the country, you could look at that and go, okay, how did we know this? How did we know that, bin Laden was the bad guy behind 9/11, if you believe that story? I mean, how do we know instantly? Could it have been some sort of artificial intelligence that was able to decide that, bin Laden was the bad guy based on his movements, his cell phone use, his other people around him? Sure, it could have been. Sure, it could have been. Or it could have been that they were looking for a scapegoat they were looking for a patsy to blame, and bin Laden just happened to be the one that fit the mold. I mean, I think that's probably more likely, but you know, I'll leave that up to you, what you decide. I mean, because in reality, none of us knows the scope or the scale of the truth of what's really going on behind the scenes. So I wanted to talk about that a little bit and the dangers of AI. You know, I mean, that, you know, we've all seen the movies, and I can't think of any, you know, AI was one of them, but there's been several movies that have talked about AI, and once it becomes sentient, it starts looking around and it realizes that human beings are actually the problem here. You know, we pollute too much, we're, you know, whatever you want to say. And of course, in all these movies, AI tries to kill you. Terminator is probably the most famous one, right? I mean, the AI, Skynet, tries to kill your ass because, you know, they think you're a plague on the earth and they want to eliminate you so they can protect Mother Gaia and whatever. And you know, here's the thing about that. Depending on who programs the AI to begin with is going to determine what that outcome would be, right? So if the person that programmed the AI was very pro-human and, you know, preserving human life at all costs and things like that, then the AI would automatically go that way. And if the person, on the other hand, is some flaming liberal that thinks humanity is the scourge of the earth, then AI is going to go that way. So I think a lot of it depends on who initially programs the AI system, of whether or not we need to worry about, you know, an AI apocalypse, which, you know, it could be, man. A lot of people believe that AI, once it becomes sentient, will actually be, you know, either Lucifer, the devil, Satan, whatever you want to call him, or perhaps even the Antichrist. A lot of people believe that somehow or another, the Antichrist will be related to technology. And when Jesus comes back, he'll actually be fighting AI and an army of robots and things like this. I mean, it could very well be. It could very well be. But along those lines, let's talk about robotics for a moment. And, you know, the things that we know. So the things we know about the military's robotics programs and different things like that, you guys have all seen the DARPA dog, I believe it was, that yellow dog, and later on they mounted machine guns to it and all this other stuff. And, you know, they've got other things too. They've got biped robots already, the military. Not the private, you know, groups, not the private companies, but the military, I'm sure, already has probably an army of robotic soldiers. At very least, they have mech suits, mechanical suits where, you know, we've talked about this and we've known this for a long time, that they have these exoskeleton suits that they can put on that help the, you know, soldiers carry 3 or 4 times more weight than they would normally be able to carry. And it helps them to be able to, you know, travel across land a lot farther than they would be able to without the mechanical suit. So we know some of this stuff already exists. It's just how much do they actually use this in real life warfare? We don't really know. Only the people on the ground really know this stuff. But I would argue, just like the SR-71 Blackbird, they've got all of this shit and they're not telling us about any of it because, you know, the repercussions, because the people would get scared. That's mainly it. The people would get scared if they knew what our government had. But I believe they already have, like, I'm sure you guys have seen it. I think it was Matrix Revolutions or something, one of the Matrix movies, when they're down in the city of Zion, I believe it was called. They're down deep in the earth, underground, and the artificial intelligence is coming through the tunnels to kill them. And there's all these guys, these soldiers, you know, the modern military of this city of Zion, and they had these huge mechanical suits that were like, you know, I mean, they jump in the cockpit and it had like, you know, 50 caliber machine gun on one side, and the other arm had, like, you know, rockets or whatever. They had all kinds of firepower, and these things were huge, you know, bigger than a school bus or whatever, as far as, you know, standing up straight, and they're huge mechanical suits. And I think our government has those. I think they have them right now, and they may have used them already and just been very secretive about their, you know, deployment and stuff like this. And the people that are pilots of these types of vehicles are probably some of the highest security level people you'll never even hear about, because they're, you know, if people like that start trying to spill the beans, the government just rubs them out because the secret is too important. So I think you smell what I'm stepping in. We're basically blind as a civilization to what our government is actually doing behind the scenes? We have no idea. None. No idea. Maybe, perhaps, I mean, this is a reach here, but perhaps the reason that Biden is pushing for World War III so hard is because they know this already. You know, that people in power probably already know that we have technology that would just blow your mind, and it would blow the minds of our enemies if we deployed this stuff in combat. So that could be what's going on. Maybe they have some ace in the hole of a robot army that they're going to release on, you know, the Russians or whatever, or the Russians and the Chinese, because at the end, that's what World War III really is about. It's the Russians and the Chinese against us, against NATO, you know, and it's just unbelievable. NATO can't even win a skirmish that's not even a full-blown war in Ukraine, and yet they're wanting to, you know, get more and more and more invested into this thing instead of calling for peace. So there's something going on that we're not privy to. There's lots of that sort of stuff out there. Another thing I want to talk about real quick is chimeras. You know, if you've never heard that term, it basically means, I believe it comes from the ancient Greek, and it basically means like, I don't remember what the original definition was, but today the modern definition means like a human or human cells that are blended with another species, like let's say apes or monkeys or whatever, right? Ostriches or whatever, you know, a mosquito man or whatever, alligator man, whatever you can imagine. You might think that, you know, the United States would never do that. We're too good. You know, we have morals, and we would never allow something like that to happen, and they wouldn't be allowed to develop chimeras. But here's the deal. I read this article last night of, I believe it was 2017 or 2018. The Chinese and the United States of America teamed up to basically make a human chimera. Now, they didn't say that they brought this thing to life or whatever, but they were blending, I believe it was monkey and human genetics, you know, and we've heard stories from years and years ago about the former Soviet Union, the Russians, where they were actually making what'd they call it? A chimpanzee or something like that? A chimpanzee or something? I can't remember, but it was basically a chimp man. And because they want super soldiers, that's what I'm getting at. They want to figure out how they can have a man or a woman or whatever that runs twice as fast as any normal human. That's twice as strong. That's, you know, to borrow a phrase from Nietzsche, the Übermenschen. That's what he talked about way back in the day. And Hitler obsessed about that sort of stuff. The Übermenschen. And also, Hitler also obsessed about UFOs and other things like that. And so, what I think we're seeing is a repeat of history. And I'm not saying that Hitler was right about all that stuff. I mean, he probably wasn't right about a lot of that stuff. But they had the Nordics, or whatever they called them, this ancient civilization that, you know, supposedly they were in Antarctica and they were living deep under the earth and stuff. I have no idea. But when you combine everything else that you see, if you look at any of these things on their own, they can sound a little weird and ridiculous and stuff. But when you look at everything else that we see, I mean, from our technology, capturing alien space vessels and things like this, I mean, could it be that there are, you know, these Nordics or whatever living deep under the ground, you know, like, who was that? Admiral Byrd was the first one that ever talked about it way back in the day, about flying over Antarctica, I believe it was. And he suddenly saw this area that was like green and lush, and it didn't make any sense. And somehow or another, man, these mosquitoes are bad. Somehow or another, I believe his vessel, his airplane, was I believe the story goes that somehow they took control of his vessel and brought him down, made him land, and, you know, he got out and talked to these people that were like the Nordics, that were like what Hitler was talking about. So, I mean, I don't know. I mean, it might all be bullshit. It might be that the guy was just really imaginative and had heard these stories about the Nordics and stuff from Nazi Germany and took that a little further. I don't know. Let me know what you think down in the comments. I mean, are there people living in the hollow earth, as they call it? You know, I don't believe the earth is hollow, but, you know, could there be sections of the earth that are hollowed out where it could support life? It could be. I've never been to Antarctica. I don't know. I've never been there. I've never been to the North or the South Pole, so I couldn't tell you what's there. We're told about these things, just like we're told about, you know, how we have all these nuclear bombs and stuff, but none of us have ever seen one go off. I mean, could it all be a lie? I mean, yeah, it sure could be. It sure could be. And, you know, I don't trust any of these government officials any further than I can throw them, which is not very far. So, all that being said, these are things that fascinate me. These are things that I don't spend a whole lot of time researching them because I have other things that are more pressing, you know, current events to cover and stuff like that. But I have, you know, kind of as a secondary over the years, looked at a lot of this stuff, and a lot of it is just unexplained. All you can say is it's unexplained. We don't know what this is, why it's happening, but it's happening. So I look forward to reading you guys' comments down below, and we can start a discussion about all these things. What do you think about this stuff? Have you seen anything that offers your mind enough compelling evidence that you know we're not alone out there? That you know that, you know, there's Nordics down under the earth or whatever. One last thing I want to cover is the DUMBs, as they call them. Deep underground military bases. I believe they exist. A lot of people think that it's just BS or whatever, but I think there's one underneath Denver Airport, and it probably connects to Cheyenne Mountain, and there's probably one under Washington, D.C., and on and on and on. I don't know if they have like mega tunneling machines or whatever, but you saw Elon Musk was able to build a tunnel that goes underneath, I believe, LA or, you know, San Francisco or something for his Teslas to drive in. And so they have the technology and the capability to build something like that. You know, now they were perpendicular to the ground level, but, you know, what would stop one from going straight down into the ground and making a deep underground military base? Nothing. Nothing. Nothing would stop us from doing that. So perhaps that's what this whole thing is all about. And when you look at the 40,000 or 60,000 foot view of everything that's going on, it starts to make a little bit more sense. Maybe, you know, this is speculation, but maybe our leaders know that something big is going to happen. Maybe there's going to be an alien invasion or something like that, or a full-scale alien attack, and they will be able to, you know, hide in these deep underground military bases with their robotic army and their AI and their chimeras and all this other stuff to fight back against these things. Or maybe people are just so power hungry and they want to control everything, and that's why they do these sorts of things. I don't know. Let me know down in the comments. What do you think? Are there chimeras out there? Are there aliens already living on Earth? Maybe the aliens aren't what we think they are. Maybe the aliens are the chimeras because they don't fit into the human makeup of, you know, our genetics, right? They've altered the genetics enough, either with CRISPR technology or with, you know, just whatever laboratory work that they've used to combine multiple different species to get the, you know, the favorable characteristics out of everything that they want to make an Ubermensch, a Superman. That's what they want to make. So anyway, guys, I don't want to go on and on today. I want to get back out here and do some more wheeling, and I think I'm going to wheel my way over to the pond and catch a few fish while I think about all these things. I can't wait to read your comments. I always look forward to reading them. I appreciate you tuning in. God bless you. God bless the United States of America for as long as it lasts. I stand for liberty. I hope you do too.